Hello everyone, welcome to Season 8 of the 1987 Grand Prix Manager 2 mod. So, last season we see another Ferrari dominant season, last season, where the champion of that season was Roberto Moreno. So, can Roberto Moreno win again this season? Will he still be a Ferrari? Can Ferrari win the Constructors this season again? Let's find out, but first, on to the transfers. First off, as usual, it's drivers who had a seat last season who don't for this season, and the only driver that is now a free agent after driving last season is Gerhard Berger, who was at Sack Speed last season. Now that that's out of the way, let's check out the driver lineup. First up, the first team that was part 3 teams who tied for last place with 1 point is Arrows. Now Arrows has the exact same driver lineup with Rosberg and Dumfries as their drivers and Nerman as the test. They also have the same engine supply with Megatron. The next team, who was also joint 9th, was Ligier. Now Ligier has the same driver lineup of PK and Palmer as their drivers and Burrell as the test driver. However, they have swapped their engine suppliers. Instead of using Megatron this season, they're using Ferrari engines. The last team that came joint last was Williams. Now Williams had their same driver lineup of Amati and Johansson. However, they have changed their test driver. Instead of Jean Alesi from last season, it is Christian Danner. And they also are sticking to their engine suppliers, which is Ford. Next up we have 8th place Bennetton. Now Bennetton has the same driver lineup as Strafe and Danini, throughout being their test driver, and they've got the same engine supplier with Ford. Next up we have Zack Speed, who finished 7th last season. We have Michele Alboreto, who was the number 2 driver last season, is now the driver number 1. Jean Alesi, that was winning his test driver this season, is the driver number 2 for Zack Speed, and Gabriel Tarquini remains as their test driver, and they're also sticking to their own engine suppliers, that is Zack Speed. Next up, finishing in 6th place last season, was Mclaren, and Mclaren have the exact same driver lineup and the exact same engine suppliers, so Prost instead as their driver numbers 1 and 2, and Patrese as their test driver. Next up, from 5th place is us at Minardi, and as you see, what I've chosen to do is keep Chris Nissen as the driver number 1, because I felt like he did pretty well last season. Adrian Campos is now the driver number 2, and Mike Fackel is being demoted to a test driver. I did this because Mike Fackel didn't really perform that well, and Adrian Campos was okay. I also changed our engine supplier. We are no longer with Renault, we are now with BMW. So this is like my first chance I actually got to leave Renault because I wasn't really happy with Renault's engine supplies. So I went to BMW because I feel like BMW is more powerful and it's lighter and it's also got better quality. So hopefully this will be a good sign of us be more up the front of the grid. Next up, the team that finished 4th last season, Ags. Now Ags have the same driver lineup of Derek Warwick and Martin Brundle as their drivers, with Franco Scapini as the test driver, also sticking to their engine suppliers, which is Honda engines. Next up, the team that came 3rd last season, Lotus, and Lotus have Philippe Alliot and Pascal Fabry as their drivers number 1 and 2. Johan Wakeahawk remains as their test driver, and they're also sticking to their engine suppliers, which is Ford engines. Next up, the team that came 2nd last season, Brabham, and Brabham have the same driver's lineup of Nigel Mansell and Thierry Boutsen, with Gonzani as the test driver, and they're also sticking to the engine suppliers they had last season, which is Megatron. So that leaves us with the team that won last season. Finally, it is the team that won last season, Ferrari. And Ferrari still had the defending champion of Roberto Moreno, with Eric Comas still as his teammate, with Stefano Modena as the test driver still, and they're also sticking to Ford engines. So here is the full driver transfers before we start round 1 of the season, and as you can see, this is probably the smallest list of driver transfers that we've covered in a single season of any of the Grand Prix Manager 2 seasons we've done so far. So yeah, very minimal transfers at that. Round 1 of the season is the Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos. The 2 Minardi drivers gain the front row of the grid, the 2 Ferrari drivers are in the second row of the grid, and the third row is locked out by the 2 AGS drivers of Brundle and Warwick. All 22 drivers made the 107% time, so all 22 drivers will be taking part for the first round of the season. At the start of the race, Martin Brundle, who qualified 5th in his AGS, stalled his car, so he was out of the Grand Prix already. Lap 2 of the Grand Prix, and Thierry Boutsen, who was in 7th place in his Brabham, got a 10-second stop-go penalty and ended up rejoining the race in 18th place. After the Minardis made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, Chris Nissen was leading the race, with Roberto Moreno in 2nd place for Ferrari, Derek Warwick 3rd for AGS, Adrian Campos 4th for Minardi, Philippe Alliot in 5th place for Lotus, and rounding off the top 6 was Nigel Mansell in the Brabham. After the 2 Minardis made their second and final pit stops of the Grand Prix, Chris Nissen was leading the race, with Philippe Alliot 2nd for Lotus, Nigel Mansell 3rd for Brabham, with Derek Warwick 4th for AGS, Adrian Campos 5th for Minardi, and rounding off the top 6 was Roberto Moreno in the Ferrari. Lap 55 of the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Nigel Mansell from 3rd place for Brabham has retired for the Grand Prix. That pushed Nelson Piquet in the Ligier into the top 6. Lap 64 of the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Nelson Piquet in the Ligier retired for the Grand Prix from 6th place. That pushed Johnny Dumfries in the Arrows into a points position. The race soon ended with Chris Nissen winning the Brazilian Grand Prix, with Alliot taking 2nd place for Lotus, Derek Warwick 3rd for AGS, Adrian Campos 4th for the other Minardi, Roberto Moreno 5th for Ferrari, and the final point went to Johnny Dumfries in the Arrows. Round 2, the San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. The 2 Minardis looking at the front row, the 2 Ferraris looking at the second row, Thierry Boutsen taking 5th for Brabham, and rounding off the top 6 of the grid is Pascal Fabry in the Lotus. And again, all 22 drivers made the grids. During the formation lap, Adrian Campos, who qualified 2nd in the Minardi, stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. And as the race got underway, Chris Nissen held on to the lead, while Adrian Campos re-entered the track at the back of the grid. Lap 3 of the Grand Prix, and Johnny Dumfries had a 10-second stop-go penalty, and he came out back onto the 21st place, only ahead of Adrian Campos, who was still in last place. After the Minardis made their first pit stop of the Grand Prix, both Brabham drivers were leading the race, with Eric Comas 3rd for Ferrari, Nissen 4th for Minardi, Pascal Fabry 5th for Lotus, and Roberto Moreno rounding off the top 6. After the Minardi drivers made their second and final pit stops of the Grand Prix, the 2 Brabhams were leading the race, with Eric Comas in 3rd, Moreno 4th for Ferrari, Piquet 5th for Ligier, and Philippe Alliot 6th for Lotus in 6th. Meanwhile, Chris Nissen got a 10-second stop-go penalty that put him from 4th all the way down to 10th. The race came to an end for Brabham 1-2 as Nigel Mansell wins the San Marino Grand Prix with his teammate in 2nd. The 2 Ferraris came 3rd and 4th, with Nelson Piquet 5th for Ligier, and the final point going to Philippe Alliot in the Lotus in 6th place. Round 3 is the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Both AGS drivers make blocking at the front row of the grid. Roberto Moreno 3rd for Ferrari, both Lotuses 4th and 5th, and the final position in the top 6 goes to Alain Prost in the Mclaren. Meanwhile, the 2 Minardi drivers of Campos and Nissen are 8th and 9th in the grid. 4 drivers did make the 107% time, but the 3 drivers who wouldn't be taking part were Alboreto for Zach Speed, and both Arrows drivers of Dumfries and Rosberg. On the formation lap, Chris Nissen, who qualified 9th in the Minardi, stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. Meanwhile, at the very start of the race, Adrian Campos kept his position of 8th place. Meanwhile, Chris Nissen is relegated to the back of the grid because he started from the pit lane. After Campos made his first pit stop of the race from 9th place, he retired along with Giovanni Matti in the Williams, and meanwhile Chris Nissen had come into the pits still at the back of the field. After he made his first pit stop of the race, Derek Warwick was leading the race for Ags, with Moreno second for Ferrari, both Lotuses third and fourth, the other Ags driver of Brundles in fifth, and Alain Prost rounded off the top six for McLaren. After Nissan made his second and final pit stop of the race, Roberto Moreno was leading the Grand Prix for Ferrari, Derek Warwick is second for Ags, both Lotus drivers third and fourth, and both of the McLaren drivers rounded off the top six. Lap 50 of the Italian Grand Prix, Derek Warwick from second place in Ags has retired for the Grand Prix. That pushed his teammate Martin Brundle into the top six, as Roberto Moreno came across the line to win the Italian Grand Prix, with the two Lotus drivers Avalio and Fabri making a double podium for Lotus. Fourth and fifth went to the two McLaren drivers of Prost and Senna, and the final point went to Martin Brundle in the Ags. Round 4 is the Monaco Grand Prix at Monte Carlo. Both Minardi's looking at the front row, with Philippe Alliot in third for Lotus. Fourth place went to Jean Alesi for Zach Speed, Pascal Fabri fifth in the other Lotus, and rounding off the top six was Joy Dumfries in the Arrows. Meanwhile, last year's champion of Roberto Moreno is 15th in his Ferrari. Off at the start of the race, Chris Nissan held on to the lead. Meanwhile, Adrian Campos dropped from second down to third, as Pascal Fabri retires on the very first lap of this race. After the Minardi made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, Philippe Alliot was leading the race with Chris Nissan in second. In third place is Michele Alboreto in the Zach Speed, Keke Rosberg fourth for Arrows, Jean Alesi fifth in the other Zach Speed, and Thierry Boutsen in the Brabham, rounding off the top six. After the Minardi made their second and final pit stop of the Grand Prix, Philippe Alliot was leading the race with Alboreto second in the Zach Speed, Keke Rosberg third for Arrows, Chris Nielsen fourth for Minardi, Nigel Mansell fifth for Brabham, and rounding off the top six is Jean Alesi in the other Zach Speed. However, Jean Alesi retires from the Grand Prix from sixth. That pushed Alain Prost in the McLaren into the points position. Lap 74 of the Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell from the Brabham had retired from 5th place, and Michele Alboreto in the Zach Speed retired from 3rd place. That pushed Thierry Boutsen in the Brabham into 5th, and Roberto Moreno into the final point position in 6th place, as Philippe Alliot came across the line to win the Monaco Grand Prix, with Keke Rosberg taking 2nd place in the Arrows, and Chris Nielsen getting the final podium spot in the Minardi in 3rd, Alain Prost 4th for McLaren, Thierry Boutsen 5th for Brabham, and the final point going to Roberto Moreno in the Ferrari. After 4 rounds looking at the championship standings, Philippe Alliot had a 7-point lead over Roberto Moreno in 2nd place with 15 points, who was ahead of Chris Nielsen by 2 points with 13. Unlucky for some. Speaking of unlucky, in the Monaco Grand Prix, Al-Sajani from Bennetton had been injured, so he will be out for the next 5 races, so we won't be back until the 11th race this season. Round 5, the American Grand Prix at Detroit. Roberto Moreno getting pole position for Ferrari, Chris Nielsen 2nd for Minardi, Philip Streif 3rd for Bennetton, Pascal Fabri 4th for Lotus, Adrian Campos 5th in the other Minardi, and round the top 6 is the person stepping in for Nannini, it's Willie Ribbs in the Bennetton. Meanwhile, the championship leader of Philippe Alliot had qualified 15th in his Lotus. Off the start of the race, Chris Nielsen held on to 2nd in his Minardi. Meanwhile, Adrian Campos disappeared from the grid. Lap 12 of the American Grand Prix, Willie Ribbs in the Bennetton retired from 6th place, and Chris Nielsen from 2nd place retires from the Grand Prix, which pushed Eric Comas in the Ferrari to the top 6, along with Giovanni Matti in the Williams. Lap 30 of the American Grand Prix, and Giovanni Matti from 3rd place in the Williams retired from the Grand Prix. That pushed Martin Brundle in the Ags into the top 6. The race soon came to an end with Ayrton Senna winning the American Grand Prix in his McLaren, with Eric Comas taking 2nd for Ferrari, Michele Alboreto 3rd for Zach Speed, Thierry Boutsen 4th for Brabham, Roberto Moreno 5th for Ferrari, and Martin Brundle from the Ags rounding off the top 6. After the American Grand Prix, another driver was injured, and this time it was Giovanni Amati in the Williams. but she will only be out for this following race this season. Round 6, the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard, both Minardi looking at the front row of the grid. Philippe Streiff qualifying 3rd for Bennetton, Jean Alesi 4th for Zach Speed, Eric Comas 5th in the Ferrari, and round the top 6 is the other Zach Speed driver of Michele Alboreto. The current championship leader, that was Philippe Alliot, is 12th in the Lotus. Meanwhile, the two sub drivers, Christian Dana, who's stepping in for Amati for this one race, is qualifying 19th, and Willie Reb, still covering for Nannini, is 21st on the grid. After the start of the race, the two Minardi drivers kept their positions of being in 1st and 2nd. Lap 5 of the French Grand Prix, and Christian Dana, who stepped in as a substitute driver for Giovanni Amati, has retired from the Grand Prix, and then Willie Rebs, who is also a substitute driver for Nannini, has also retired. After the Minardi made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, Chris Nissen was leading the race with both Zach Speed drivers 2nd and 3rd, Alain Prost 4th for Mclaren, Adrian Campos 5th for Minardi, and rounding up the top 6, Roberto Moreno in the Ferrari. After the Minardi made their 2nd and final pit stop of the Grand Prix, Alesi was leading the race in the Zach Speed with Chris Nissen 2nd, Michele Alboreto 3rd for Zach Speed, Alain Prost 4th for Mclaren, Roberto Moreno 5th in the Ferrari, and the final points would be going to Adrian Campos in 6th place in the other Minardi. The race soon came to an end with Jean Alesi winning the French Grand Prix, with Chris Nissen 2nd in the Minardi, Michele Alboreto 3rd in the other Zach Speed, Alain Prost 4th for Mclaren, Roberto Moreno 5th for Ferrari, and the final points went to Adrian Campos in the other Minardi in 6th place. Round 7 is the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, with Ayrton Senna taking pole position for Mclaren, both Ferrari 2nd and 3rd, Pascal Fabry 4th for Lotus, Alain Prost 5th in the other Mclaren, and rounding up the top 6 was Martin Brundle in the Ags. The championship leader of Philippe Alliot is 7th in the Lotus, and the two Minardi drivers qualified 16th and 22nd. Giovanna Amati, who's returned from her injury last round, is 11th for Williams. And the three drivers who did make the 107% time and would be taking part of the race were Adrian Campos for Minardi, Joy Dumfries for Arrows, and Nelson Piquet for Ligier. After the start of the race, Chris Nissen kept on to his position of 16th. After Nissen made his first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Moreno was leading the race with Senna in 2nd, Comas 3rd for Ferrari, Fabry 4th for Lotus, Alain Prost 5th for McLaren, and round the top 6 was Martin Brundle for the Ags. After Nissen made his 2nd and final pit stop of the race, Moreno was leading the Grand Prix with Senna in 2nd, Pascal Fabry 3rd for Lotus, Eric Comas 4th for Ferrari, Martin Brundle 5th for Ags, and round the top 6 is Alain Prost in the McLaren. The race then came to an end with Roberto Moreno winning the British Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna taking 2nd for McLaren, Pascal Fabry 3rd for Lotus, Eric Comas 4th for Ferrari, Alain Prost 5th for McLaren, and the final points went to Philippe Alliot in the Lotus. Round 8 is the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim, and both Ferrari drivers locked out the front row of the grid, with both Lewis drivers locking out the second row of the grid. In 5th place is Martin Brundle in the Ags, and round the top 6 is Alain Prost in the McLaren. Meanwhile, the two Minardi drivers qualified 22nd and 14th on the grid. Only two drivers to make the 107% time, and the two drivers that won't be taking part of the Grand Prix were Adrian Campos for Minardi and Keke Rosberg for Arrows. All for the start of the race, Chris Nissen kept on to his position in 14th place. Lap 3 of the Grand Prix, and Chris Nissen for 14th place got a 10-second stop-go penalty and comes out in 17th place. After Nissen made his first and second stops respectively because of the changing weather conditions, both Ferraris were leading the race with Philippe Alliot in 3rd, Alain Prost 4th for McLaren, Pascal Fabry 5th in the other Lotus, and Derek Warwick rounding off the top 6 in his Ags. Just before Nissen made his final pass for the Grand Prix, Martin Brundle from 6th place retired for the Grand Prix. That pushed his teammate Derek Warwick in the Ags into a points position. Meanwhile, Eric Comas was leading the race for Ferrari, with Pascal Fabry 2nd for Lotus. 3rd was Roberto Moreno for Ferrari, Alain Prost 4th for McLaren, Philippe Alliot 5th for Lotus, and round for top 6, Derek Warwick for Ags. The race ends with a Ferrari 1-2 with Eric Comas winning the German Grand Prix, Roberto Rinaldi 2nd for Ferrari, 3rd is Pascal Fabry for Lotus, Alan Prost 4th for McLaren. Philippe Alliot, the championship leader, was finished 5th for Lotus, and the final points went to Derek Warwick in the Ags. Halfway into the season, it was now time to check the drivers and constructors. Roberto Rinaldi will now have a 9-point lead over second place Philippe Alliot, who was a further 3 points ahead of the other Ferrari driver of Eric Comas. And into the Constructors Championship, it will be no surprise that Ferrari has a 19-point lead over Lotus, who was a further 6 points ahead of McLaren in 3rd place. Round 9 of the season, the Hungarian Grand Prix of the Hungaroring. Both Minardi in pole position, both Ferraris in the 2nd row. Thierry Boutsen 5th for Brabham, and round for top 6, the substitute driver in the E is Willy Ribbs in the Bennetton. Now, you may see all 20 drivers on the grid, however, there is one caveat to that. In 18th place, you would expect to be Jean Alesi, but no, it's Satoru Nakajima. Now, what happened is, Jean Alesi was replaced for the rest of the season by Nakajima. Nakajima wasn't the test driver, Nakajima was just brought in to replace Jean Alesi permanently for the season. Taking into account Jean Alesi won the French Grand Prix this season. Off at the start of the race, the two Minardis kept their positions of being in 1st and 2nd. After the Minardis hit their first pit stop of the Grand Prix, both Minardis were leading the race, both Ferraris were 3rd and 4th, Thierry Boutsen 5th for Brabham, and Willy Ribbs running off the top 6 in the Bennetton. After the Minardis made their 2nd pit stops of the Grand Prix, Campos was leading the race with Roberto Rinaldi 2nd in the Ferrari, Chris Nissen 3rd in the Minardi, Eric Comas 4th for Ferrari, Thierry Boutsen 5th for Brabham, and round for top 6 is Willy Ribbs in the Bennetton. Lap 64 of the Hungarian Grand Prix, and Thierry Boutsen from 5th place in the Brabham retired from the Grand Prix. That pushed Philippe Alliot in the Lotus into the top 6. Lap 75 of the Hungarian Grand Prix, and Philippe Alliot from 6th place retired from the Grand Prix. That pushed Michele Alboreto in the Zach Speed in the top 6, as the race soon ended with Adrian Campos winning the Hungarian Grand Prix, Roberto Rinaldi taking 2nd for Ferrari, Chris Nissen 3rd for the other Minardi, Eric Comas 4th for Ferrari, Willy Ribbs 5th for Bennetton, and round for top 6, Michele Alboreto for Zach Speed. After the Grand Prix of the Hungaroring, Thierry Boutsen was injured and he's out for 4 races, so Brabham's test driver needs to come in up until the 15th round of the season. Round 10, the Austrian Grand Prix at Österreich. Eric Comas qualifying pole position for Ferrari, Chris Nissen 2nd for Minardi, both Lotuses are on the 2nd row, Roberto Rinaldi 5th for Ferrari, and round for top 6 is Michele Alboreto in the Zach Speed. The driver replacing Boutsen while he's injured is Pascal Gonzani, and he qualified 18th in his Brabham, while his teammate Nigel Mansell qualified 8th on the grid. The other Minardi is Adrian Campos, who qualified in 14th place, and Alessandro Nannini, who was injured for a lot of the season. He is now back, and he qualified 16th for Bennetton, while his teammate Streif qualified 21st. Off at the start of the race, Johnny Dumfries, who qualified 20th in his Arrows, stalled his car, so he was out of the Grand Prix. Meanwhile, Chris Nissen kept on to moved up to the lead of the race, while Adrian Campos moved up to 13th. After the Minardis made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, Chris Nissen was leading the race with Michele Alboreto 2nd for Zach Speed, Roberto Rinaldi 3rd for Ferrari, Nigel Mansell 4th for Brabham, Derek Warwick 5th for Ags, and Giovanni Amati in the Williams rounding off the top 6. After Minardi made their 2nd and final pit stops of the Grand Prix, Michele Alboreto was leading the race with Zach Speed, with Chris Nissen 2nd, Roberto Rinaldi 3rd, Giovanni Amati 4th for Williams, Nigel Mansell 5th for Brabham, and Derek Warwick rounding off the top 6. The race soon ended with Michele Alboreto winning the Austrian Grand Prix, with Chris Nissen taking 2nd for Minardi, Roberto Rinaldi 3rd for Ferrari, Giovanni Amati 4th for Williams, Nigel Mansell 5th for Brabham, and Derek Warwick getting the final point in 6th place for Ags. Round 11, the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. Both Minardi on the front row of the grid, with Satoru Nakajima 3rd for Zach Speed, Alessandro Nini 4th for Bennetton, Eric Comas 5th for Ferrari, and Pascal Fabry ran for top 6 for Lotus, while the championship leader of Roberto Moreno is down in 10th place for Ferrari. Off the start of the race, Pascal Fabry qualified 6th in his Lotus, stalled his car, so he was out of the Grand Prix. Meanwhile, the two Minardis kept their positions of 1st and 2nd. After the Minardis made their first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Nissan was leading the race with Campos in 2nd, Amati 3rd for Williams, Moreno 4th for Ferrari, Nakajima 5th for Zach Speed, and Eric Coase in the other Ferrari rounding off the top 6. After the Minardis made their second pit stop for the race because of the changing weather conditions, Giovanni Matti was leading the race with Nissan in 2nd, Stefan Johansson 3rd for Williams, Alan Prost 4th for Mclaren, Roberto Moreno 5th for Ferrari, and round the top 6 is Adrian Campos in the Minardi. After Campos made his final pit stop of the race, Chris Nissan was leading the Grand Prix with Roberto Moreno in 2nd, Alan Prost 3rd for McLaren, Giovanni Matti 4th for Williams, Eric Comas 5th for Ferrari, and round the top 6 was Adrian Campos, as Eric Comas retired from the Grand Prix that pushed Nigel Mansell and the Brabham into the points position. The race soon came to an end with Chris Nissan winning the Canadian Grand Prix, with Roberto Moreno taking 2nd for Ferrari, Alan Prost 3rd for McLaren, Giovanni Matti 4th for Williams, Nigel Mansell 5th for Brabham, and the final points went to Adrian Campos, who finished in 6th place. Round 12, the Portuguese Grand Prix at Estoril, with Chris Nissan taking pole position, Roberto Moreno 2nd for Ferrari, Adrian Campos 3rd for Minardi, Eric Comas 4th for Ferrari, and the 3rd row is locked out by the two Lotus drivers, while all 24 drivers make the 100% time, and Boutsen stand-in Pascal Gonzalez qualified 21st compared to his teammate in 10th. Off the start of the race, the two Minardi drivers keep their positions of being in 1st and 3rd. After the Minardis made their first pit stop of the race, Chris Nissan was leading the race with Giovanni Matti in 2nd, Pascal Fabry 3rd for Lotus, Nigel Mansell 4th for Brabham, Martin Brundle 5th for Ags, and the final point position was locked out by Roberto Moreno in the Ferrari. After the Minardis made their second and final pit stops of the race, Giovanni Matti is leading the Grand Prix with Nigel Mansell 3rd for Brabham, Alan Prost 3rd for McLaren, Chris Nissan 4th for Minardi, Eric Comas 5th for Ferrari, and the final point position is currently held by Martin Brundle in the Ags, as Nigel Mansell retires from the Grand Prix that pushed Pascal Fabry into 5th place. With just 2 laps left to go in the race, Martin Brundle from 6th place retired from the Grand Prix that pushed Roberto Moreno to get the final point position, as the race comes to an end with Giovanni Matti winning the Portuguese Grand Prix, Alan Prost taking 2nd place with Chris Nissan 3rd for Minardi, Eric Comas 4th for Ferrari, Roberto Moreno 5th in the other Ferrari, and Derek Warwick for Ags getting the final point. After 12 rounds of the season, it was now time to look at the Drivers and Constructors Championship. The Drivers' Championship shows that leading the championship is Roberto Moreno, 10 points ahead of Chris Nissan in 2nd, who was a further 14 points ahead of Eric Comas in 3rd in the other Ferrari. And in the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari were obviously leading the Constructors' Championship with 24 more points than Minardi, who were a further 15 points ahead of 3rd place Mclaren. Round 13, the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch. Eric Comas taking pole position in his Ferrari, the two Lotus are 2nd and 3rd, Chris Nissan 4th for Minardi, and the two McLaren drivers lock out the top 6. The other Minardi driver of Adrian Campos is 16th on the grid. The championship leader, Roberto Moreno, qualified 10th in his Ferrari, and the only driver doing 107% time and would be taking part was Keke Rosberg in the Arrows. After the start of the race, the two Minardi drivers kept their positions of 4th and 16th. Lap 3 of the Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell from 15th got a 10-second stop-go penalty that put him from 15th down to last place in 21st. After the Minardis made their first pit stops of the race, Pascal Fabry was leading the race for Lotus, Eric Comas 2nd for Ferrari, 3rd Alan Prost for McLaren, 4th place is Philippe Palio in the Lotus, 5th Ayrton Senna for McLaren, and round the top 6 is Nakajima in the Zach Speed. After Minardi made their second final pit stop of the race, Eric Cummins will lead the race with both Lotus second and third, both Mclarens fourth and fifth, and the final point would be going to Martin Brundle in the Ags. The race then ended with Eric Cummins winning the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch, while the Lotus gets a double podium with Alio and Fabry. The two Mclarens fourth and fifth, and Martin Brundle gained the final point in his Ags. Round 14, the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez. Pascal Fabry gained pole position in his Lotus, the two Ferrari drivers second and third, Philippe Alliot in the other Lotuses in fourth, Thierry Boutsen, who's finally made his return to Formula 1, qualified fifth in his Brabham, compared to his teammate Nigel Mansell, who is down in I can't actually see him. Oh, 7th place, and Chris Nissen is on the third row in his Minardi in 6th. Meanwhile, the other Minardi driver of Adrian Campos is 20th on the grid. On for the start of the Spanish Grand Prix, and Adrian Campos kept his position of 20th, while Chris Nissen kept his position of 6th. After the Minardi made their first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Pascal Fabry was leading the race with Eric Cummins in second, Philippe Alliot third in the other Lotus, Roberto Renault fourth in the other Ferrari, Nigel Mansell fifth for Brabham, and Chris Nissen in 6th place in his Minardi. Lap 36 of the Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell retiring from 5th place for Brabham, along with Adrian Campos, who was at the back of the field. That pushed Chris Nissen in the Minardi into a points position. After Nissen made his second and final pit stop of the Grand Prix, Pascal Fabry was leading the race with both Ferrari drivers second and third, Philippe Alliot fourth for the other Lotus, and the two Axe drivers are 5th and 6th. The race then ended with Pascal Fabry winning the Spanish Grand Prix, with Roberto Renault taking second in the Ferrari, Eric Cummins, the other Ferrari driver, taking third, Philippe Alliot fourth in the Lotus, and the two Axe drivers finishing in 5th and 6th. With 2 rounds left to go, the lead between Moreno and Nissen has increased. Chris Nissen was now 16 points behind Moreno, with Eric Cummins 1 point behind Chris Nissen, and in the Constructors Championship, Ferrari, with 2 rounds to go, is 40 points ahead of Lotus, who they've already won the Constructors Championship, but Lotus are only 1 point ahead of Minardi in third. Round 15, the Japanese Grand Prix of Suzuka, with Chris Nissen in pole position, with Ayrton Senna in 6th for McLaren, Adrian Campos third in the other Minardi, Eric Cummins 4th for Ferrari, Philippe Alliot 5th in the Lotus, and round for top 6 is Thierry Boutsen in the Brabham, while the two drivers are doing the 107% time were Philippe Streiff for Bennetton and Keke Rosberg for Arrows. All for the start of the race, the two Minardi drivers kept their positions, being in 1st and 3rd. After the Minardi made their first pit stop of the race, Chris Nissen was leading the race with Senna in 2nd, Alboreto in 3rd, Mansell in 4th, Prost in 5th, and ran for top 6 Derek Warwick for Ags. After they made their second pit stop of the race, Senna was leading the race with Alboreto in 2nd, Mansell in 3rd, Prost in 4th, Derek Warwick in 5th for Ags, and ran for top 6 Chris Nissen for Minardi. After they made their third and final pit stop of the Grand Prix because of the changing weather conditions, Senna was leading the race with Mansell in 2nd, Alboreto in 3rd, Alan Prost in 4th, Chris Nissen in 5th, and Derek Warwick ran up the top 6. Meanwhile, the championship leader of Roberto Moreno was down in 13th in his Ferrari. The race then ended with Ayrton Senna winning the Japanese Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell 7th for Brabham, Michele Alboreto 3rd for Zach Speed, Chris Nissen 4th for Minardi, Alan Prost 5th for McLaren, and round off the top 6 is Derek Warwick for Ags, while even though Roberto Moreno finished 15th in Ferrari, he still wins the Drivers' Championship as Chris Nissen was too far behind to beat him in the final race of the season, with 13 points difference between the two drivers, and the last race you can only get 9 points winning the race. Roberto Moreno is this season's champion. In the Constructors Championship, we already know that Ferrari have won the Constructors Championship, but second place is still up for grabs between the Minardi, Lotus and McLaren. Round 16, the Australian Grand Prix at Adelaide. The two Lotuses looking at the front row of the grid. The Ferraris on the second row of the grid, Martin Brundle 5th for Ags, and ran for top 6 Thierry Boutsen for Brabham, while the two Minardi drivers qualified 8th and 12th on the grid, so Lotus having the advantage of possibly finishing second in the Constructors Championship. During the formation lap, Eric Comas, who qualified 3rd in his Ferrari, stalled his car so he had to start from the pit lane. Meanwhile, once the race had got underway, the two Minardis made up a position thanks to Eric Comas stalling his car. Meanwhile, Johnny Dumfries, who qualified last in the grid, had stalled his car so he was out of the race. After the Minardis made their first pit stop of the Grand Prix, the two Lewises were leading the race with Roberto Moreno in 3rd, Thierry Boutsen 4th for Brabham, Martin Brundle 5th for Ags, and running up the top 6, Nigel Mansell in the Brabham. As things looking so far, Lotus are looking like they're going to finish second in the Constructors Championship, and Minardi 3rd and Mclaren 4th. After the Minardis made their second and final pit stop of the race, the two Lewises were still leading the race with Roberto Moreno 3rd, Martin Brundle 4th, and the two Brabham drivers running off the top 6. Lap 67 of the Australian Grand Prix, and the two Minardi drivers retired from the Grand Prix at roughly the same time. Lap 71 of the Australian Grand Prix, and Philippe Alliot retires from the lead of the Grand Prix that pushed Fabry into the lead, Moreno in 2nd, Brundle 3rd, and pushing up to the top 6 was Alain Prost in the Mclaren. The race soon came to an end with Pascal Fabry winning the last race of the season, with Roberto Moreno taking 2nd for Ferrari and Martin Brundle taking 3rd for Ags, the two Brabham drivers 4th and 5th, and the final point went to Alain Prost in the Mclaren. With the season finally over, it was now time to check the final drivers' constructors standings, and we'll see what engines are being improved for the next season. In the driver standings, we see Roberto Moreno take the championship by 19 points ahead of Chris Nissen, who is second in Minardi. Eric Comas 4 points behind in 3rd place with 41 points, and then it's the two Lotus drivers of Fabry and Alliot with 36 and 32 points respectively. Next up we have the Mclarens, who have scored 30 and 28 points respectively in 6th and 7th. Rounding up the top 8 in page 1 is Michele Alboreto for Zach Speed with 22 points. Just 1 point behind Michele Alboreto is Nigel Mansell for Brabham with 21 points. Then we have Giovanna Matti in the Williams with 15 points. Then it's the other Minardi driver of Adrian Campos with 14 points, which is 31 less than his teammate Chris Nissen. Thierry Boutsen with 14 points, tied for 11th place. Then it's Jean Alesi that Satoru Nakajima replaced halfway through the season with 9 points, the same amount of points Martin Brundle has in his Ags, which is the same amount of points his teammate Derek Warwick scored. And then at the end of page 2 we have Keke Rosberg with 6 points in 16th place. On page 3 we see the last 3 drivers who scored points. Willie Rebs, who was a substitute driver for Bennetton this season, with 2 points. Nelson Piquet in the Ligier with 2 points, and Joey Dumfries had the last only 1 point in 19th place in his Arrows. And then we have the non-scorers this season, Jonathan Palmer in the other Ligier. Both the Bennetton drivers, Picard Ginzani, who was a substitute driver, because I think, if I remember rightly, Mansell was injured at some point. No, Boutsen was injured this season. Stefan Johansson, the other Williams driver, with no points. Finally, Satoru Nakajima, who replaced Sean Lacey with no points for Zach Speed, and Christian Dad, the substitute driver for Williams, also no points. So that's the driver standings done. Let's now look at the Constructors Championship. In the Constructors Championship, we see Ferrari, the only team to get over 100 points this season, with 105 points respectively. Lotus coming in 2nd place, who were 37 points behind Ferrari, but there were still 9 points ahead of 3rd place, which is Minardi, who only beat Mclaren for 3rd place by just 1 point. And then we go down to 35 points with Brabham in 5th, 4 points ahead of Zach Speed in 6th, Ags in 7th with 18 points, and rounding off page 1 is Williams with 15 points. And then we have the bottom 3 teams who scored less than 10 points respectively. Arrows with 7 points thanks to Keke Rosberg getting 6 of them, Bennetton getting 2 points because of the substitute driver of Willie Rebs, and Nelson Piquet getting the only points for Ligier with 2 points. So that's the Constructors Championship out of the way. Let's see what engines are going to be improved for next season and which teams might be getting upgraded from those engines. The first engine supplier to improve their engines is Renault. Now this season, not a single team was using Renault engines this season, but this could tempt teams into using them for next season. The second team to improve their engines for next season is Honda. Now there was one team that was using Honda engines this season, and that is AGS. Now if AGS remain to use Honda engines for the next season, then AGS definitely might be more of a contender for next season. The third engine supplier to improve their engines is Ford. Now Ford was being used by Lotus, Ferrari, Bennetton and Williams. Now if Ferrari could continue their dominance in this mod to probably win the next season, Lotus may be more of a contender as well. Bennetton would definitely improve, maybe get out of being second time for last place like this season they have, and Williams, maybe Stefan Johansson could improve for the team if he's still driving for Williams next season. The fourth and final supplier to improve their engines for the season is Zack Speed Engines, which has been only used by Zack Speed. So Zack Speed made a huge blunder by replacing Jean Alesi for Satoru Nakajima this season, but with Zack Speed Engines, maybe Zack Speed will be a bit more competitive because Michael Barretto gained a lot of points and the other two drivers didn't really do that well. But we'll see what Zack Speed does for next season. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this season of Grand Prix Manager 2. What will happen next season? Will Ferrari still win? Will Roberto Moreno win again next season? Who knows? We'll find out. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching and goodbye!